Welcome to Let's Accelerate. My name is Sara and I'm here with Michael, and we are from Bosch Management Consulting. Today we have Jan and Marco from Stryber, and we welcome you for joining us today. Thank you. Jan, I would like to start with you. Can you tell your story of how you went from being a senior executive manager in a major corporation to founding a major venture building startup?
Oh, that's a long story. Thanks for having us. Welcome to the audience as well. First I had to get out of that major corporation by failing my way out of it. Right. So I recognized that I couldn't basically achieve anything there. So you're familiar with the story. I spare it to the audience. It's really a bit of too long story. But I was an executive responsible for marketing at a large travel company. And I described my position as the guy hanging on a rope outside the Titanic, polishing the tea while the ship was sinking. That's the kind of degree of inability to change that I perceived. So I had to get out of there. And for myself, I abandoned trying to change these ships.
So Jan, the problem was you then, right? So all they needed to do was change executives, and everything recovered. Correctly? Is that correct?
It would be much too much of an honor if I would claim so much responsibility. And unfortunately, the ship still went down, even though I left the deck.
So what caused the ship to go down? What was it that led to you abandoning ship and probably others with you? What happened?
It's not one single thing that happened, and that's exactly the real frustrating perception, the real frustrating environment that I perceived at the time. So when you're trying to change course of a large organization, you're basically trying to change a bit of everything. So you cannot just like pull the steering wheel a bit and say like the new direction is a bit more to the left. The rest of the ship will just continue to steam ahead, right? So it's not that you're going that there is some one lever that you could say, if you're able to pull that one, then the ship is going to change. And the reason is that this would require change on everything, starting from operations. Well, you can do that. You can restructure, right? Then you have the whole systems that support the operations, IT infrastructure, and all those things. You could rebuild it. We failed. We didn't manage to do so. It's a huge challenge to do that, like when you're trying to rebuild your core infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And then it comes to things such as how you operate. What is your operating model? And then the strategy consultants come in and say, here's your target operating model. And then you try to get from your present model to the target model, and that's just, it's never going to happen. And then there is things such as culture. So you try to change culture. Like these days, it's very fashionable to try to put more agile culture into a corporation, right? And to try to make them think more innovative and all these things, which I think, well, I need to be careful with the choice of my words, but I don't think there's any point in doing that, because those people are just not supposed to do that. They're supposed to run the ship. They're supposed to run the ship in a very efficient way on its current mission, on its course. That's why the ship has been built. And that's why that's how it has been tuned over decades usually, right? And you cannot change this culture. You cannot tell these people, think different. It's a mismatch. It's not that these are bad people or anything. It's just a mismatch between their current mission.
And it can actually be dangerous, right? So if you tell them to think differently and be more agile while they're executing the known business, that could actually destroy your base as you destroy the current business.
Absolutely.
And you still haven't found the new one, right? So you have no cash and no innovation, right?
Absolutely.
That's why you decided to build this venture building?
Yeah, my personal story is even longer than that. But just to close that chapter, then there are some even more tricky pieces to tame, which is the governance structure around you. So what are the incentives at play? Who has got what kind of interest, also in terms of achieving their own business goals and finally their own remuneration? What are they measured by the end of the year? And most of the time, it's something that is tied to the P&L. So more revenue, more profits, or something of the sorts. Whereas if you would want to change course, you need to invest. So your time horizon that you're looking at is years. You cannot invest from the P&L. It's always conflicting with the goals that you're being measured against. So that's just not going to happen, right? And that environment you cannot overcome while you're aboard the ship. That was the real frustrating realization I had to have.
So to summarize that point, because I think it's one of probably the most crucial points, is that it's not that these executives are idiots. It's not that they don't know that they have to innovate. It's just that they have KPIs that they have to meet that conflict with actually doing exploratory innovation. because we all know that that cuts against their EBIT targets, their revenue targets, etc. Right?
Yeah, Marco, can you also tell us a bit from your background experience and explain what motivates you to enter into this mission from Stryber, from venture building?
Right, that's a great question. So, hello everyone. I hope you enjoy this. Let's accelerate with our friends from Bosch. I come from a background of corporate world, investment banking, and in this type of scenario, you are always focused on those metrics that Michael just said. Like we want to focus on EBIT, operational efficiency. We like to look at balance sheets, and we look at the historical data. We never look to the future. We always look back. And after a while, I became more passionate and fascinated about what's into the future rather than what's in the past, and how can I help corporates. Or I decided to continue my mission and join forces with Stryber because I'm not only very excited about the mission, but also passionate about helping corporates to get out of this conundrum. I think that overall that's the point.
So Jan, we've talked venture building, we've mentioned Stryber, we've talked about your backgrounds. I think we've given a lot of hints, kind of what you're doing. But could you describe what venture building is and why is it necessary?
Maybe I'll explain it by actually finishing my story, because I ended my introduction 10 years back when I left my corporate mission there. I tried to build startups later on, or a startup later on, and I wasn't successful with it either. So now you can do a cynical comment, Michael. You're happily invited. So that would
I was just going to say that's the normal result, right?
Yes, and this time it was my mistake, right? I can't take the credits for sinking the big ship, but the small ship I sank all on my own. So I did all the classical startup mistakes of over-specifying an MVP and not understanding what the MVP actually was and not even getting there, right? So this kind of things that you see in most first-time founders. And I tried again. So it's kind of this. I started to embark on this learning journey of what it takes to actually make something from nothing, like from scratch, from building up. And what struck me most was this diametrical difference to what I experienced back at the corporate. It was really in every single dimension. It was just the opposite. It was low on resource. It was fast. It was extremely rational in the sense like you went after your mission, you tried to accomplish it. It wasn't about politics or getting in someone's agenda or something like that. It was about trying to fulfill purpose, not to optimize your P&L by yet another 0.5% or something, right? And that struck me, and it led me kind of to the recognition also that the corporate had huge advantages, and I missed them. I missed the scale of the corporate. I missed the resources of the corporate. I missed things like customer access, credibility, reputation, right? So that the corporate can easily roll out an innovation to hundreds of thousands of people in a matter of weeks. Right? We couldn't. We had to build our customer base one by one. So it takes an incredible long time to get there. And I was convinced that if you combine those smartly, both parties could benefit. So then we were actually looking around and saw all this innovation and collaboration efforts, open innovation efforts going on between corporates and startups that all had kind of the same hypothesis, but did it in our view in quite a naive way. Like, oh, let's just invite those startups over, let's have a joint brainstorming session, let's do some sort of joint venture or whatever. And basically none of them worked out. I'm exaggerating a bit, some did, but most of them were basically naive from both sides. From the corporate side, not understanding how the startups work, and from the startup side, not understanding how the corporates work. And cracking this is actually our ambition. That's why we founded Stryber. That's the mission we are on. We're trying to smartly combine both worlds in a way that both worlds can benefit, and to build something substantial out of it. And what drives me personally is to build something new. And that's not necessarily linked to any particular corporate. I take my personal pleasure in seeing that something is thriving that hasn't been there before. And the last part of your question was, why do you need it? Well, you don't. You don't need it per se. Not everyone needs it. It's not something that you just have to do. And that's something that I usually, the question I ask senior executives, because they all say we need to innovate, we need to innovate, we need to innovate, and I ask them, why? And then normally they don't have an immediate answer or not a substantial one, because there is some sort of intuitive belief that you have to innovate. But no, you don't. You don't have to innovate. There's no there's no reason in itself to innovate. But you have to innovate if let's say your current core business is suffering from market pressures that the business is not doing so well as before. You have to innovate if you are in an industry that's extremely fast moving and that every year or two you're being overtaken by some competitors. You have to innovate if you're in a market that is expanding and where you have to try to capture the market segments one by one, etc. So you need a goal to innovate. That's my point. And if you do have the right goal, then building new business from scratch can be worthwhile undergoing. And just to finish that, it's in our conviction, it's one of two ways. The other being M&A transactions that also are a very viable way in order to get there.
So I think, Marco, you come from the world where M&A happens, right? I mean, venture capital is similar in some ways. It also fails a lot. So let me ask you something. Corporates have all the advantages that any startup would die to have: resources, money. Although I would say most of that money is already tied up, Jan and Marco, in their long-term budgeting. But Marco, if you had to sum it and boil it down to the main problem that you're solving, why does someone need Stryber? Why can't they do it themselves? Why do they need you?
Cool. It's been almost 25 years since Clayton Christensen published The Innovator's Dilemma. And after spending millions of euros and dollars in corporate innovation, in open innovation theater, corporates, as you well said, still haven't been able to capture the full value of those initiatives. And going back to your question, based on evidence and data that we collected by interacting with a lot of players in the market, we do believe that one critical component that's missing is the right mindset. The people and the team that has the expertise and the skin on the game to make those initiatives happen. So it doesn't matter if the corporate has the resources, the money, the distribution channels, or they're able to commercialize an invention if they don't have the right people to execute. So if you think about a startup or a new venture, or if you go to a new market, you're operating under a high degree of uncertainty, which is the exactly opposite of what a large corporate does, that operates in a high degree of certainty as regulatory government.
I would like to challenge you, Marco, and Jan on that, because imagine that inside the company there is the right mindset, but you still have to do this exploit business while you are doing the explore. But then how would the company manage these two realities with different processes or different structures? What will be then I would like to hear your both opinions on this, your advice to a successful combination of this ambidexterity company.
Yeah. So there's no silver bullet. So each organization has its own particularities. And it all starts with strategic alignment, because only by doing a deep dive on the strategic goals of the organization on the long run, we can identify the corporate levers and the corporate governance that will allow this ambidextrity to happen. But being more generalist on this topic, what we do see that works well is two things. Who has the right mindset and the skills to explore, then you should have them running their own ideas, their own projects with their own budget, their own constraints, their own OKRs, KPIs. However, you put the incentives towards that direction. And the exploit team has to continue doing operating to create operational efficiency. So that there must be this ring-fenced business unit around the goal that they want to achieve. And then this is just the beginning, because if these people that are operating under the Explorer mode are successful, then you must have a SWAT team that knows how to integrate both worlds, because this is also something that happens. It's usually, okay, we hire the right people with the right mindset and skills, we ring-fence the business unit, and we grow some business, but at a certain point of time, they want to bring back to the mothership. And if they don't have this SWAT team that can put those two worlds together by integrating process to different incentives, different remuneration, different governance, then it usually is a problem too. So that's my experience.
Yeah. And Jan, so how will then Strybers support, or on your daily work, support companies to do these kind of innovations and building ventures inside a big corporation?
In different ways. Marco just said there is no silver bullet, and we really don't try to pretend. So we don't have D1, but we have gathered a lot of experience over the years, also of different settings that always are similar in kind. Like the questions are always similar. It's always around the topics that we've raised earlier in this call. And I put it that way. It comes to get to the answer first. It's we bring these skill sets that are not part of the exploit operation. So we have them, and we have them from day zero. We can start right now building something. We have these teams, right? And this is not something sustainable. So no company should work with us over a decade. That just wouldn't make any sense. So you have to internalize those skills. And that's something that I admire a lot with you. So the way you operate, you have that. You have built up and made your own experience. You have acquired those skills inside your own organization. Now, what we bring to the table is, in the first place, what Marco said, like getting an understanding of that topic at all. And honestly, most companies, they don't have this understanding of ambidexterity that you have. So that understanding that you need to separate an operation that is running at scale, trying to increase their operational efficiency, and one that is trying to explore. And you've got a huge challenge here in aligning not only strategy that you can probably achieve rather quickly, but also something like time horizon. Because it's quite easy to start some initiative. And it's also rather easy to protect it for a year or two, but get into year 3. And then like your internal forces from the exploit operation will try to shut you down. Because they say like they're wasting our money. What do they do? It's all small stuff, and it's just we could use that money to increase our own operations a little bit better.
Which, by the way, is correct in most cases, right? It does turn out true. I mean, Marco, you mentioned it, and I think this is surprising for people. But corporates are failing at exploratory innovations at astronomical rates. So when they do create these exploratory teams out there, in the majority of cases up till now, it probably is true that they're wasting your money. They're out there with their Post-it notes and maybe a nice little office having fun. And here we are working in the real business, making big money.
Exactly.
So how do we know that what you're doing is actually working? How do we know that? How do you build that trust with those core business people to give you some leeway, some trust, right? To say, you know, this might work. We just need a little bit of trust and resources, by the way. So how do you build that relationship?
It's in any case, it's always a long journey. So it starts with usually it starts with 1 or 2 change agents that are very high in the organization that recognize that problem of ambidexterity, so that they get to the point to understand, I cannot do this with the crew I have on my big ship now. And then you start to think about, okay, how can you set it up? And it's really not about creating one team with the Post-it notes. That would be just like theater operations, right? But so with those people in the first place, what we talk about all the time is strategic alignment. How do we bring that in line? And with strategic alignment alone, you can get the senior management onto the job. Like they start to understand what it is. And it takes change management with the senior executives in the very first place. So what I do, the story from my big ship, I've made a keynote speech out of it. And with all of our customers at some point, I give that speech to the senior management in some sort of strategy retreat. Or like just to tell the story and put them a mirror into the face and say, look, that's you. I tell you a story from my ship back then, but yours no different. So some of the learnings that apply from my experience there are just universal to any large-scale operation. And once you start to have this recognition as a senior manager, then like you can start to have the right kinds of discussions. You can have the right also actions, because the first things you need to do are little things. Marco put them like the big catastrophes are caused by small mistakes, but also big successes are caused by small first steps. So you need to take the right ones, right? So this leads to establishing this environment where you can actually provide those units with the independence they need. It means that you need to provide them with the funding and the time horizon, and then it also needs to hold them accountable with hard figures. And that's probably the single most important piece of advice. And also, you heard Mark in his introduction. He's coming from a finance background, and that's for good reason. The whole logic is financial. It's about building up a portfolio that is reasonably diversified, that has an expected return value on the strategic goals that you have as an organization. So it needs to return. It needs to deliver on the return that it has been set up with in the first place. So this cannot be something so vague as make us more agile, or we want to be a bit more exploratory or innovative. Those are bullshit goals. Sorry the language. So there needs to be a very clear strategic goal. Sort of, we know we are probably being disrupted in the next decade or so, and we also see where the forces are coming from. Everyone sees the disruptive forces coming from, right? Problem is the inability to act. So you know the direction you have to move into, and then you can provide a clear mission. You have to bring us in there. now go. And your goal is to build something up that is of substantial value to our organization over the course of the next 5 or 10 years. And that's then like where you can hold the teams accountable, because you can measure them along the way. What is the progress they make across the stages from 0 to 1 to 100 to 1 million, right?
Yeah. And I'm still missing, maybe Marco, just to interrupt, I'm still missing, why do I need you though? Why can't I do that myself? What prevents corporations from doing that themselves?
It's always good to have an independent view and bring in someone that walk the talk and has the execution capacity to turn these ideas into reality. So we have this execution capacity by deploying teams of UX designers, product owners, venture architects that bridge the gap between the skills and the mindset that we talked about. But I just want to go to something that's more core and simple, Michael. It's like innovation today is very sexy, it's a very sophisticated world. Everyone wants to talk about innovation. Everyone wants to be innovative. But the bottom line is innovation is about growth. And you can reach that through like different ways, right? And if you think about life, in the life cycle of a corporation, it's not deterministic. It's non-linear. So we are all subject to randomness. And uncertainty is part of the explore kind of strategy or becoming ambidextrous. And usually what it takes to build trust on top of our track record, the execution capacity, and the deliverables along the journey, because it's something very tangible. So when we build something in 3 months and they see this product on the road, something that will take a corporate 2 years and probably 10 times the amount of resources to do it, they realize the benefit immediately of collaborating with Stryber. On top of culture change, all those kind of intangible benefits that they also have.
And just quickly to add to that, I said initially that no one should work with us for a decade. So what is usually the case is they are at point 0. You have this visionary leader that recognizes, I want to engage in that journey. And maybe you can share some of your experiences actually at Bosch. If you build that up yourself, you're in the same situation as I was with my first startup. You have to learn every step on your own.
Yep.
And this takes time. If you're a senior executive, you're lacking time. Your organization is slow, but you as an executive are lacking time. You have a time window of usually 1, max 2 years to prove your case. After that, you're getting under pressure. You have to show the results, right? And that's what we bring to the table. We accelerate that tremendously by having the proof of traction immediately. We start right off. And while you're running, you're building a new ship. So it's always, in our mandates, there's some aspects of, we help you build that capacity up so you can do it on your own. So we enable you to have these kinds of ability internalized versus being dependent on some external service company or even worse, a consultant that just tells you how to do it. Right? So that's what we bring to the table.
Okay, so to just really summarize it, visionary leaders, I think, are rare by definition. And so you need somebody who's sort of accepted the math of the world. There's randomness. It's likely that every business model will fail. And so we always sort of have to bet on uncertain things. How much we bet is up to it. But so you need somebody who recognizes this fundamental dilemma of any company, and then that's willing to take the risk. But you also need somebody who knows that the obstacles of doing this internally might be so high that it makes sense to do make or buy, right? Outsource that risk to somebody who can move a little bit faster, but still is operating within the strategic envelope of the company, right, or the umbrella. Mm-hmm. And that's where your value proposition is essentially that, right? You can outsource that to us. We can teach you how to do it, and you'll get some fast results rather than having to build everything from scratch.
Yeah, exactly. And by transferring also this really the senior level know-how of how to set it up and bring it into a framework that has at least a chance of success. I mean, we're not promising you things that we cannot hold, but we can bring our best knowledge into the organization, but you say that's the best way you can set this up to have the highest chance of success. And
that's what I've always respected about the way you guys operate. It's that you've accepted that you might fail, right? And you have to do this, but probably the most likely result of exploring an innovation is failure. But you need to do it in a systematic manner so that you place enough bets that you have a chance for a winner to somehow emerge. They may never emerge. That's also that's randomness in numbers, but that's ultimately what you're saying is you have to take this risk. You have to try it. You might as well try it with us, and it costs less, right?
But think about the Explorer as buying an option, right? It's like you're building optionality and flexibility into the future of your corporation. And if you think about also comparative advantage theory, if you are good at providing widgets and you're fighting for margins, like you shouldn't deviate your attention because you're going to lose market share. So it makes sense you focus on your exploit. And then you should have someone to help on the exploit. So this is like comparative advantage. And the other obstacle that we see, just to tag along about the visionary leader, is the agency problem, right? So we see agency problem all the time.
Let me summarize that, and I think we'll head to our exercise, Sada, to wrap up.
Yep.
I see you getting a little bit antsy over there. I think you've brought up a crucial point that we should explore maybe in another episode, is this agency problem. You didn't refer to it earlier when you were talking about KPIs and incentives, but for those who are listening, the agency problem really is that managers or CEOs, executives have incentives to benefit themselves at the expense of the company. And in innovation, this is one of the interesting things. In innovation, I think you see this, it's exacerbated because there's almost no benefit for the executive if you have not set up the governance and organization correctly to ever invest in innovation. So the company has to invest to guarantee a future business model and sustainability, but the agents in the business, they don't have that. Their incentive is not to do that. So there's a misalignment in innovation. So I've enjoyed this conversation because of that, because you guys focus so heavily on organization and culture. And at the end of the day, you can't separate the two. You have to get them both right, and one follows the other. It's up for the corporation to figure that out. So there's a great discussion. Sada, maybe you want to lead us to our exercise.
Exactly. So now we will have this sentence competition exercise to finalize our podcast today. I will start with Marco.
Oh my God.
So I will start the sentence. Please try to finish in a short manner if possible. Stryber will fail if
we don't realize that executives can turn around their businesses to create long-term economic impact.
All right. So Jan, one to you. Stryber will succeed because
we will build some of the businesses of the future that are not yet around. And I'm totally ecstatic to embark on that journey to build these businesses. We all are. That's what drives us as a company.
Well, and the final one, Marco. The next big thing in venture building is?
The next big thing in venture building is doing real corporate innovation, not doing innovation theater. That's the next big thing. And stay tuned, because there's something very hot in the oven that will come to address that problem.
Great. That's a great way to end our podcast. So this was our Let's Accelerate. Thank you so much, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Michael. Bye, everyone.